Pessoal, boa tarde. Hoje eu estou aqui com o Markus Krueger, que é diretor de programação do Historical Cultural Society of Clay County. A gente vai iniciar uma conversa, inclusive, sobre esse espaço que é muito interessante, que fica localizado no condado de Clay County, em Montana, que tem alguns elementos relacionados à era viking, bastante interessante. Agora eu vou passar a palavra aqui para o nosso convidado para ele explicar um pouco sobre esse espaço. Mr. Krueger, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to talk us about this space that's very interesting. Can you explain about this museum, how this is start, how the activity of the museum, because this is very interesting that have some Viking Age aspects in a museum in the Clay County, Montana, in United States.
We're a museum in Moorhead, Minnesota. We are directly across the river from Fargo, North Dakota. So we're up in the very northern part of the USA. And we're a border town. So we're the first building in Minnesota, and then right across the river is North Dakota, Fargo. So we do local history here, but about the founding of our town, about our towns throughout history. But one of the quirky things about where we are here is there were a lot of Scandinavian immigrants who came here in the 1870s and 1880s and 1890s. And these Norwegian immigrants and Swedish immigrants, they continued to think about the old country. And so one of the, we have two big kind of national tourist draws here. One of them you see behind me is a replica of the Gokstad ship in Norway. So a 1,000-year-old Viking ship that archaeologists in Norway dug up in the 1800s. If you go to the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, you can see a ship that looks just like this. But this ship has an exciting story of its own. This ship actually sailed from Minnesota through the Great Lakes to New York City and then across the ocean to Norway in 1982. So that also inspired this project. Also inspired another man named Guy Paulson to build a full-size replica of a stavchurch, of a stavkirche, in our backyard. I can't go out into there because my internet always cuts out, but I'm walking to the back of the ship right now, and you can see, you'll be able to see out the back door that we have a stavchurch in the backyard. Here.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
I'll open the door. It's hard to see.
Oh, that's amazing. It's a replica of a Stavin church. Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Very, very beautiful.
So, yeah, I guess I'm not necessarily a Viking scholar as much, but I do read a lot about it. It's a passion of mine to learn more about Scandinavian, about the Viking Age Scandinavia. And we've had Viking reenactors out here to do big reenactor villages in the past for our Viking festival. So Scandinavian heritage is still big here. We're not all Scandinavian anymore, just like a lot of cities in America. We are a globally connected metropolitan area. We're a university town. We're a tech center. We've been a refugee resettlement community since World War II. So I grew up with a lot of, Moorhead is also home nowadays to a whole lot of Iraqi Kurdish people from Iraq. A lot of Liberians from a lot of Congolese, people from Congo, of course, Hispanic. A lot of Hispanic heritage here. This is home to Minnesota's oldest Hispanic community. So we are from everywhere. There's a Hindu temple a block from us, but we're from all around the world, like a lot of American towns. But because of that initial generation where the first census that captures our community, it was in 1880, and 86% of the population of this county were immigrant families. and probably 3/4 of them were Scandinavians. So Scandinavian heritage, we keep these traditions in America more so than a lot of other places. I'd say probably more so than anywhere else in America, probably.
Oh, that's very interesting. I will correct my information. I said Montana, but it's Minnesota. Sorry
Sure.
for
Yeah.
saying Montana. And about the sheep, one of the most interesting things it's because I read it's and he was inspired by the Gokstad ship, right? And how
Mhm.
is the construction for the ship? How they start the idea we will have this
Yeah,
a
I'll
ship
tell this.
in the United States when based on the Viking Age ships?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I can tell you the story of the voyage of the Hjemkomst. So Hjemkomst, it's a word we get from Norway. It means homecoming. The story starts with him. This is Robert Asp. Robert Asp was a school teacher here in Moorhead. The school that he taught at is now Robert Asp Elementary School, named after him. He was a World War II veteran, so it's that generation we're talking about. In the early 1970s, he gets the idea that he wants to build he wants to go to Norway, the land of his ancestors. He doesn't want to buy a plane ticket like everyone else. He wants to take a Viking ship. And there weren't any Viking ships available, so he had to build his own. So he cut down 100 oak trees, and then he asked some of his friends that they wanted to help him fix up an old sawmill so they could turn the logs into planks. So they did. He needed a place to build it. This thing is bigger than his garage, so he had to find a place to build it. And 20 miles east of here, there is a small town named Hawley, Minnesota. Maybe 1,500 people back then. He saw a potato warehouse that didn't have any potatoes in it at the time, but it looked about the right size for a Viking ship. So he got permission from the landlord to build a Viking ship in the potato warehouse for 10 years. And he checked out all the books in the library about Vikings and Viking ships, and he got the plans on how to build. He got the plans for the Gokstad ship from a book,
Wow.
and he started building a Viking ship in a potato warehouse. And everyone thought he was crazy at first, but also when they peeked their head into the potato warehouse to see what was going on, they found that he was really inspiring. And so this project really captured the imagination of everyone. The dream starts with him, and then it expands out to everyone who gives him a tree, and everyone who gives him who helps him cut the wood, and then everybody he talks to about it, all of his students who he talks to about it in school. And so it becomes everyone's dream, everyone's project. And it's a good thing he was so inspiring, because he got sick while he was building it. He got leukemia, and it was terminal. So by that time, he knew that this ship was going to sail to Norway, because it was bigger than him by that time. But he also knew that he wasn't going to be on the boat when he got there. So what he wanted to do with the rest of his life is he wanted to take a boat ride on Lake Superior, up at Duluth, Minnesota. If you go 250 miles straight east of where I live, you get to Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth, Minnesota is on Lake Superior, and you can take the Great Lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. So that's where the voyage begins. So with the help of everyone, he completes his ship. They put it in the water on Lake Superior, and that's the summer of 1980. And he dies after Christmas of 1980. But his friends and his family take it forward, and they continue. They do it. They spend the next summer, they do training missions on Lake Superior to see how does a Viking ship handle, and the following year they're ready. There was a crew of 13 sailors, some American sailors, 3 Norwegian sailors, 4 of Robert Asp's children were sailors on this voyage. and I'll show you the map. They took it through. I wonder if this map is showing up. They took we're yeah. So from Minnesota, they drove it on a semi truck to Lake Superior to Duluth, and then it goes through Lake Superior, Lake Huron, Lake Erie, and the Erie Canal to the Hudson River, and then down to New York City, and then from New York City all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Norway. And then once they got to Norway, they went to pretty much every port in Norway, being treated like kings. They hung out with the king. They had champagne with the king in Norway on his yacht, and this was a really big deal. People wrote songs about the Comes. We made a couple documentaries about it. Sometimes we're on TV. Yeah, the crew members tell me that it was about a 3-month voyage. The first month was through the Great Lakes, getting to the Atlantic Ocean. Because we're Minnesota, we're actually very close to the geographical center of North America. So in order to get to the Atlantic Ocean, you have to go half a continent through the worst sailing was Lake Superior. Lake Superior is a very nasty, difficult body of water to navigate. And then, so the first month was through the Great Lakes. The second month was was across the Atlantic Ocean, and the third month was the Victory Lap, meeting thousands of people all across Norway.
Whoa, that's very interesting history. It's amazing to see that he has a dream to build a ship to travel from Minnesota to Norway. That's a very amazing to see. That is a different thing that I was not expecting, because is so how can I say, it's so beautiful to see how he built all these to take his dream alive to complete this mission. And that's for me, it's a very amazing to know about this history.
Yeah, you couldn't make this story up in Hollywood. No one would believe you. But it really happened.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very different history. It will be a very good movie if Hollywood make a movie about that. It's a very good history. And about this, you want to talk?
Oh, go ahead. No, what would you like to know next? I was going to talk about the Stav Church.
Yeah, I would like to know about the Stav Church. That was my next question. You can explain about that, the history about the Stav Church, because she is very beautiful and have the amazing history too, I think.
Yeah. So, okay, making sure I have my keys and I don't get locked out. Okay, so this. Let me know if the internet starts getting strange. I'll walk closer to the building. But
okay.
So this is a full-size reproduction copy of the Hopperstad Stav Church in a little town called Vik, Norway, on the Sognefjord. The original Hopperstad Church was built around the year 1140, which makes it a couple decades older than Notre Dame in Paris. It's one of the oldest wooden buildings still standing in the world. So Norway wouldn't give us the original. We had to make our own. The reason we have it is because of a man named Guy Paulson. Guy Paulson was a scientist, an animal scientist with the North Dakota Department of Agriculture in Fargo. He still lives in Fargo. He's in his mid-80s. I still chat with him often. So wood carving is what Guy Paulson does for fun. And he's always been interested in his Norwegian roots. His father was born in Norway, and he grew up in a lot of American communities that are filled with Norwegian, the descendants of Norwegian immigrants. And so in 1996, he's looking to retire from work. And he doesn't just want to watch TV. He wants a retirement project, and this is it. He He spent 5.5 years building a recreation of a medieval basilica in medieval Norwegian basilica. And he put it next to the Viking ship, obviously, because that's the logical place to put a Viking church. So he did all the carvings himself, inside and out. He and his wife Beva and his sister Damaris, they paid for everything themselves. So most of the wood comes from Minnesota, pine from near where the Mississippi River starts at Itasca Park. His friend Dale Ruff did all the architecture work for free to turn a medieval building into something that meets city code in Minnesota in the 21st century. They hired a construction crew of 5 guys to do the heavy lifting, to cut down the trees and shape the wood and put it all together. That was Straight River Log Homes in Park Rapids, Minnesota. When they finished it, took 5.5 years. They gave it as a gift to the city of Moorhead so people can visit it. And I think it's interesting that this has been here since 1998 is when it was dedicated. So it's almost 30 years now, 25, 30 years. And we get maybe 30,000 people a year coming to see it. So hundreds of thousands of people from all across America and all around the world know just a little bit of something about 12th century Norway and the Vikings converting to Christianity because Guy Paulson built this church.
Whoa, no, it's amazing to saw that in the United States because it's so different and beautiful in this area, and it's really amazing this structure. I was really impressed, and I have a lot of can I say, I want so much to visit one day this museum because it's very interesting. So that it's a I have a big passion for the Viking Age, and so see that in the United States, it's really amazing.
Yeah, you should come. You might want to come in the summer. The winters are cold. We were voted the worst. Fargo was voted the worst weather in America.
Yeah, I think that Brazilians that are watching the channel, I think they are very interesting to saw that because it's totally different. When I found this museum, I was really impressed because I don't know that have a museum like that in United States. It's so different, and it's very interesting. And about the activities of the museum, you say that have reenactors of the Viking Age. How the specific the activities that you have in the museum have battles, recreative battles. How have the activities? How?
Yeah, so we don't do the reenactments anymore, but we used to. It was one of those festivals that it's very hard to put on. There's not a lot of people that work here at this museum, and so I would have to build a Viking village on a Thursday, and then it would be 2 days of Vikings, and then I'd take it down, and somebody would go to the hospital with heat stroke or being hit with a sword every year. So yeah, during COVID, we decided that it was kind of too expensive to keep going, but those were fun days when we invited Viking reenactors from all across the country and across the world, from Scandinavia as well. We made replicas of all of the Viking, full-size replicas of all the Viking A-frame tents. You know, those tents like they found with the Gokstad ship and the Oseberg ship. So we made reproductions of those tents, and we would actually sleep in them over the weekend. Some of the people who are reenactors, they were blacksmiths. Some of them were turning flax into linen. Some of them were dyeing wool with urine. So we made reproduction clothing using tools. You know, I still have my pair of boots that were reproductions of real Viking Age archaeological finds. So we still have friends who are in that industry who like reenacting, and since we're a museum, we didn't want to be like cheesy Renaissance fair. Renaissance fairs are fun, but we wanted this to be more of an immersive historical experience. So the things that we wore were reproductions of archaeological finds. And the people we invited to help us tell the story were the best reenactors who did things as accurately as they could.
Oh,
Those were fun days.
That's very, very nice to saw that, because we have specific activities in the museum that show for people a little thing about Viking Age, about some aspects of this culture that was part of the of Clay Count, and it's very, very, very nice to see, because the Count of Clay Count have this connection with the Scandinavians for the past, and this is very interesting to saw that. And can you explain a little about how this starts, the immigrations of the Scandinavians for the Count of Clay Count, how this is beginning to, how
Sure.
Scandinavians go to this specific area, and how Minnesota, you have a lot of the Scandinavians immigrants from the parts of compared to parts of the United States.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the, say, 1850. 1850. There was not a town here. There were no towns here. This was still a very fascinating place. This was the meeting place between two gigantic, powerful, and very different Native American nations. Right here was where the people. Well, this is where the people of the prairie met the people of the forest. You can get very. You could write you should write whole books about, people write books on this. So, but just to put it very simply, we're where the Great Plains of America meets the Great Forest of America. So the people of the plains here were the Wahpeton Dakota, the Sisseton Dakota, the Yanktonay Dakota. They're the people of the prairie. When people throughout the world think about Native Americans, they think of this culture. This is Sitting Bull was Dakota. Another name for Dakota is the Sioux. So Sitting Bull was Dakota. They're hunting buffalo with teepee and live in teepees while on the road. So that this culture of people, and they met the people of the forest, the Ojibwe people, and they come in with canoes rather than horses. And so it's a very interesting place that we should acknowledge. And then it was in the 1850s that these two cultures, who depended on the fur trade for their economy, the fur trade collapsed. The animals were overhunted, and so for economic pressures, they were forced to sell their land to the United States of America. When America was founded and George Washington was president, this land that I'm standing on was not part of the United States of America. This was the land of the Dakota and the land of the Ojibwe. But in the 1850s, it became the United States of America. A few years after the Civil War ended in 1865, America starts expanding west again. And in 1871, 72, these towns were founded by a railroad that was building west on its way to the Pacific Ocean. So about every 6 miles, they'd put a town down, and they would name these towns usually after guys who worked for the railroad. My town is named after somebody who was on the board of directors of the Northern Pacific Railway, William G. Moorhead. William G. Fargo has a town on the other side of the river. And then once the towns were established, then they say, okay, everyone move here now. And this happened, the 1870s, it happened to coincide with the peak of Norwegian immigration to America. So at the end of the 1800s, the end decades of the 1800s, the 1870s, 80s, 90s, about 1 in 3 Norwegians moved to the United States. And they typically wanted to be farmers. and all the farms in Vermont and Virginia and New York and Ohio and east of us, all the farms were taken. But they came here with nothing, and there was a law. They were very poor immigrants. They were a poor people. Norway has always been dirt poor until they discovered oil in the 1960s. Now they have money. But before that, the people of Norway were very poor. So they came with nothing. But there was a law called the Homestead Act where the United States says if you come out to wherever the frontier is at the time, wherever the land is not yet settled, but the United States government owns the land, if you move out here, we will give you a free farm. So the way it worked is if you move here and you live here for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, you get 160 acres of land for free. And if you wanted more than that, then we were selling in the 1870s, land around here was selling for $1.25 an acre. Now it's like $3,000 an acre. But so the Norwegians, they came here with nothing. They came to where the land was free, and they came by the boatload and by the train load. They came in such numbers that the population of Norwegians and Swedes, we talk a lot about Norwegians, but the number 2 country place around here was Sweden. So they came here. I don't know why there's balloons around.
Professor, I think you touched in some effect of the image.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm doing.
No problem.
So the number 2 country of origin for people living around here back then was Sweden. So obviously a Scandinavian country too. So the more Norwegians and the more Swedes you get, the more Norwegians and the more Swedes come, because we all have brothers and sisters and best friends and cousins from back home that we want to reunite with. And they all want to come to America. So in the 1880s, if you're a Norwegian and you want to move to America, there's a town in probably in Minnesota or Wisconsin or North Dakota where half your family already moved to and half your hometown already lived. So it's I find settlement patterns in America fascinating. So there's on the Buffalo River, like 7 miles away from me, all those families who live there are interrelated families who live from the Fyresdal Valley of Telemark. 7 miles south of me are interrelated families who moved here from they're German families from the Schleswig-Holstein region of Germany on the Danish border. So people live where they live for a reason. They move where they move for a reason, and they live where they live for a reason. Nobody just takes a map and throws a dartboard at a map and say, I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. We live there because our family has our lives there, or we live there because we have a friend who had already moved there. That's true in 1880. That's true in 2024. One of my friends, Zach Amin, he's a Kurdish. He came here from Kurdistan in Iraq, and he didn't have any other friends and any other families in America. So he moved here because his friend Hashim was also a translator for United States Army forces in the Iraq War. Hashim already lived in Moorhead, so he decided to move to Moorhead. The same thing was happening for Norwegian and Swedish and German families in 1880, 1890, coming to America. So this happened to be this region, the Red River Valley, which is the border region between Minnesota and North Dakota. This was a magnet for Norwegian immigrants, because if you come here, you can stay with family. There's so many Norwegians here that you don't have to speak English. You can continue to speak Norwegian while you learn English. It's an American tradition that the men of the family typically, immigrants learn. The first immigrants learn English through work, and the older family members who stay at home, traditionally the moms, the grandmas, back in the 1800s at least, but even into the 1900s and mid 1900s, they could continue speaking that mother tongue, whether it's Spanish or Swedish or Finnish or German. So they would, and here in the Red River Valley in Minnesota, eastern North Dakota and western Minnesota, Scandinavians settled in such high numbers that you had whole communities that were almost entirely Scandinavian. So they keep those Scandinavian traditions in the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. This is strange throughout America. This is I have a friend from Idaho, which is 1,000 miles west of here. They don't do that in Idaho. They didn't settle in such dense clusters. So she thinks it's strange that people like me around here, I identify myself as a Swede, and and my wife identifies as a Norwegian, even though it's been 150 years since our families came over here. We still call ourselves Swedes and Norwegians and Germans and Finns in Minnesota because we're one of the immigrant states. They don't do that in Alabama or Texas or Washington or other places, or California and other places of the world.
Oh, that's interesting. It's very very nice to see that have this identification with some country, with some culture. It's very similar. We have here in south of Brazil, example, we have a lot of Germans immigrants. We have many immigrants from Europe, Poland, and they identify themselves with these countries. And sometimes people say, "Oh, but you are Brazilian, you have to identify like Brazilians." But they identify with the past of they have of the our generation passes, and that's I think that's very very nice because you have a culture that was part of yourself and part of the next generations that was born in Brazil, because they have their own culture and they are trying to preserve these roots. And
Yeah.
that's very very interesting to see that of the Scandinavians in Minnesota. That's very very very
Yeah.
interesting
And you can
thing.
see it in the name of the Viking ship. The name of the Viking ship that Robert S. built is Hjemkomst. It's Norwegian for homecoming. So I know that we Americans have it. I think it's interesting to find out that you Brazilians have this too, where yes, USA is my home, Brazil is your home, but in this nation of immigrants, in some way, Norway is home too, even if we've never been there before. Um, when Norway plays Italy in the World Cup, we cheer for Norway. You know.
Yeah, it's the same thing here in Brazil. We have a lot of immigrants that recognize themselves. We are from the other countries. We are part of other things, not only Brazilians, but we are
Yeah.
Ukrainians, Polands. We are Germans, and that we have a lot of immigrants in example in Curitiba. We have a lot of immigrants of Norwegians, of Swedes. We have this state that have many many persons from um, Europe, and we have these traditions in many points of the city. We saw that representations of these countries. We have constructions that represent these countries, like this museum, and that's very nice to saw that in that countries have these many places that represents this part of the history of the immigrations from other countries.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I didn't realize I'd never been to Brazil, but so I didn't know that about Brazil. I'll have to go down there and see how you make your Brazilian lefse and lutefisk and rumengrot.
Yeah, you have to saw here in Curitiba, because it's a city that have many immigrants, and have a portion of immigrants from Scandinavian, many of Norwegians too, and we saw that very very interesting. In São Paulo, we saw much Swedes example, and we saw these many aspects from Scandinavia in some places. A specific place too. It's a country with a lot of immigrants. Brazil receive a lot of immigrants, and that's been part of our history too.
And one thing, so thinking about that, I think a lot about how, because I speak English, because Americans speak English, we get our idea for what the Middle Ages was like from English books about England. So I know more kings of England than I know very few kings of Norway. I know very few kings of the Holy Roman Empire. We're not taught Holy Roman Empire. If we're talking about the Middle Ages, American kids learn about English history, even though most of us Americans don't hail from England. If you look at where a typical American's ancestors were 1,000 years ago, they were in Spain or the Middle East, Israel, or they're in China, they're in Kenya. We're from all around the world, but I'm glad that we have this in this very Scandinavian part of the world. I'm glad that some of us are still talking about, when we talk about the Middle Ages, let's talk about the Vikings, and let's talk about it from the Scandinavian point of view, the Scandinavian perspective, not the English perspective, where the English say that the Viking Age starts when Lindisfarne was sacked and it ends in 1066 for some reason, and they forget that the Viking raids continued in 1103 and on after that. We got a tour going on, so you can see that people actually do come see here. Hey guys.
That's very interesting. It's not possible to enter in the South Church now.
Every time I try, the connection drops, and then the phone call in. But I'll tell you what you can do. So you can go to our website. We have virtual tours, so of the ship and of the church. So so you can virtually, you can use your finger, and you could even put virtual reality goggles on, and you can walk on the deck of the Yumcom ship, and you can walk around and inside and even fly around the Hopperstad Church. So our website, it's a long website. So we are the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County. So that's hcscconline.org. And then you can find the virtual tour of the Hopperstad Church and the virtual tour of the Yumcom ship.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And for just the final question, how the operations of the museum works, the hours we can visit, how many persons work in the museum, how we can have the agenda for the museum. It would be interesting for the public to know about that.
Yeah, so we're open every day, Monday, every day of the week. We're open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Tuesdays, we're open late until 8 p.m. Sundays, we open a little late at noon to 5. And yeah, we're open every day except for the major holidays like Christmas and New Year's Day and Thanksgiving. And so I've talked to you about our big Scandinavian American tourist draws. We're the quirky museum that everybody's got to go to when they fly into Fargo. So people from around the world are here today, around the country are here today. I just got done with a school tour from a town 60 miles away that drove up here to see us. But we are also the County Historical Society for our region of Minnesota, for Clay County, Minnesota. And so I actually spend most of my day doing local history about Minnesota and making exhibits. I'm making an exhibit right now about, we did an oral history project with Iraqi and Kurdish Americans who live here. I'm doing an exhibit about the history of food, growing food, eating food, and doing history, doing research on what was this building in 1870 or 1880. So that's the stuff that I usually do, but so it's fun I'm mostly in the 1800s and 1900s at work, but so it's fun every once in a while to go into a church, do a tour, and be in the 1100s.
Oh, that's very amazing. People, that's what I think will be very interesting for the museum. I think have Brazilians that living in Minnesota that will be like Canadian, they will be very present to saw the museum. And I would like to thank you so much, Mr. Krueger, for receiving us, for receiving the channel, for show us the museum. I was thinking that was amazing to saw this museum. I was be very pleasure to see these structures, and I think it will be very interesting for person that accompany the channel, that will be very that will, is very interesting for us to learn more about these structures of the museum. And thank you so much for receiving us again.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, if anybody's in Minnesota or North Dakota, you got to come see this place. Yeah, we got stories that you wouldn't believe that actually happened, and it's a fun place to work at. Everybody leaves inspired. Thank you for inviting me to talk about it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure receiving you.